Hey, Olive Branch, and welcome back to the Olive Branch Christmas podcast. We are super excited you're joining us today, and we're going to be here in episode 13. Really interested in this topic. We're going to be discussing Mary today, and I've got my friend Stephen again with us.
Hey, everybody.
And so we're going to be really diving into these ideas about Mary, who she was, what really happened. Is she really a virgin? Was she really immaculately conceived? Or what is all this stuff going on here? Because there's a lot of weird stuff in there and a lot of applicable things for moms. Stephen's done a couple devotionals actually recently on that, right?
Yeah, I really enjoyed trying to figure out, why we've lost the I think people are afraid to talk about this situation because of the fact that, on one end we have Catholics and people who have venerated her almost to a religious status, like a goddess.
Oh yeah, she truly is. I mean, in fact, in the Roman Catholic tradition, she is now reached the level of what they call co-redemptrix, which means that she was literally suffering for humanity's sins with Jesus. Like she's the other redeemer. And it's really strange because she's supposedly sinless as well. And so you get that whole interesting kind of...
Now, if she's sinless, are her parents sinless and her parents...
Right. They actually, one of the things, the big things is the Immaculate Conception is not about Jesus. It's about Mary's Immaculate Conception. And so it's not Jesus who is immaculately conceived. It was literally, she was protected from sin. So she's the sinless woman who's going to bring the Messiah. But you're right. It kind of just goes like, well, then were her parents? And how about her parents?
How far back do you go back with that?
Yeah. And it also leads to, interesting things like, for example, when Jesus was meeting the woman in adultery, right? And he's looking around and he writes in the sand, all the Pharisees are there. And he goes like, hey, he who has no sin, throw the first stone. And suddenly out of nowhere, the stone hits the woman in the head and he turns and goes, Mom! I'm just kidding. That's like one of those funny Catholic jokes. But even they think that's funny. But the idea here is that Mary has been elevated to the place where you literally pray to Mary. She becomes this kind of goddess kind of thing. But
I see her on candles and things.
Right, especially in the 99-cent store.
Yeah, I'm just curious as to how should Protestants approach that with their Catholic friends. I noticed in my experiences with Catholics, it's not everybody does that, but then a large percentage of them do. So you kind of have to walk through what do they think about Mary.
Yeah, and I find a lot more Hispanics have a lot more Mary focus because there's some attachments to
Guadalupe.
Yeah, Guadalupe and some of that stuff too. But that's all side notes. I think for us, we can all agree that what's cool about Mary is that she should be more venerated in the Protestant church than she is.
Yeah.
I do think that she's gotten kind of ignored because of the overemphasis in the Catholic Church. Because we can all agree that she was chosen to be the mother of God.
Yeah.
I mean, and what we mean by that is Jesus is she's the mother of Jesus. She's the incarnated. He is the incarnated God, and God chose to come through her. So we can indeed join the ancient church in saying, yeah, she was the mother of God. We can say that.
Yeah, what's fascinating is I did my devotions on Luke, and I was Luke 26, and it's just talking about the angel Gabriel comes to her and how similar this is. I didn't get to talk about it in the devotion, but just how similar this is to other visits by angels. It reminds me a lot of Gideon, and there's some of this that's with Samson's mom, and just all kinds of really similars where an angel or some kind of spiritual messenger comes.
Well, and remember that Moses' mom is extremely prominent in his story as well. I mean, she's the one who literally puts him in the basket, hides him in the reeds, so there was a planning going on in the background of Moses' mother. And so you find moms are venerated throughout these segments, and these angels are appearing for, definitely Gideon. Gideon doesn't have the mom show up, but for Samson's mom gets the message and Manoah gets the message, and they're just both like, oh, it's God. He talked to us. That's freaky.
Yeah. Well, I just find it fascinating because I think in our modern society and in Protestant circles, as far as we're getting into kind of what is feminism and the church is a patriarchy. And even right now, there's a meme going around that just says, it's a picture of Mary and it says "Me Too" on it. Like Jesus had assaulted her in this situation. And for me, that gets my ire up, and I'm kind of like, I don't think we understand this passage of the Bible and what Mary thought of her own role. We think of it, well, she's a part of the patriarchy. She has to just be someone who pops out kids, and that's the only roles women had back then.
Well, it goes even further that there is a very large feminist movement that tried to claim that Jesus isn't born by a Virgin Mary. She was raped by some Roman official, and therefore she's become a liar to try to cover her tracks kind of attitude. And all these efforts haven't helped in lifting womanhood up or lifting up who God wanted to bless. I mean, after Eve, this is the most blessed woman in the Bible, period. Yeah. Deborah's got nothing on Mary.
Yeah.
I mean, none of these women in the Old Testament are even close to what kind of blessing God's pouring out on Mary other than Eve. And Eve, we know what she did. And so here we go. This is a big, 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 big deal.
Yeah, and I think oftentimes we don't actually understand how much Mary had comprehended of her role, and that's why I went through some of these passages and just kind of the unique relationship she had above other people.
Yeah, what were you seeing there?
As far as I was seeing here is like, what kind of person is Mary? What does she think of the situation that she's in? So in Luke, in chapter 26, the angel comes.
Chapter 1,
verse 26, it goes on to 29. But she was greatly troubled after he said, hey, I'm going to visit you. This thing's going to happen. And saying, tried to discern the sort of greeting that this might be. And the angel said, don't be afraid, Mary. You have found favor. For you, behold, you conceive a womb, and you will bear a son, and you shall call him the name Jesus. He'll be great. And then she's kind of like, well, how will this be? I'm a virgin. He says, the Holy Spirit will come upon you with power of the Most High will overshadow you, and therefore the child will be born, and the Holy, the Son of God. She says, and then later she says, behold, I am your servant of the Lord. Let it be to me according to your word. And the angel departed from her, which is like, she didn't be like, this is a violation of my personhood. How dare you? Like,
yeah, and it's not the Beatles "Let It Be" attitude either, which is this kind of like, when Mother Mary came to me, let it be.
That's also Paul McCartney's mother that he's talking about in the song, and not Mary, Mother of Jesus. It's not a Catholic thing.
This is a different "Let It Be."
Yeah,
but she is saying, "I am the handmaid, the servant of the Lord." This is a very clear like bond servant. She's like, "I'm a slave to you, God," and this is a powerful statement. Paul will use the same statement about himself. He'll say, I'm the bondservant of the Lord. This is someone who is so willingly, and that word bondservant is a willingness to serve, right? So in the Hebrew world, if you were a slave and you were offered your freedom, you could bond yourself to your master if you didn't want to leave. And so you would then put your ear in the awl of the door, or then they would take an awl through your ear, pierce your ear, and that was, you are now bonded. And that's the idea.
You joined the family.
You joined the family. It was like, I'm so pleased to serve you, and yeah, I'm all in for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And this is how she views the Lord. She's like, I am all in. I'm your bond slave. I'm here. God, let's do this. That's a hugely faithful thing, especially in comparison to Zechariah.
Yeah, the one that just before this passage, Zechariah is the father of John the Baptist.
Yeah, and he is like told, you're going to have a child. And he's like, hold on a minute here, sonny.
He gets all grouchy old.
Yeah, he gets all grouchy old manish on him. He's like, yeah, I'm an old man. My wife's an old lady. We can't have kids. How's this going to? And Gabriel's like, you just not just say that to me. I stand before the Lord. And so you're not going to speak a dime till this boy is born. And he's like the opposite of faithless versus the amount of faith this young lady has. And I think that's what we don't remember. Here's old man and here's young lady. You did a little bit of research on that.
Yeah, well, I think it's fascinating to me is you have Zechariah's response is interesting because it doesn't matter how old or young you are. If you respond faithfully to the Lord as a servant, he'll bless you. It's when we resist God and we know him that you become and put yourself in a difficult situation. With Zechariah, he should know that Abraham and Isaac, Abraham and Sarah had a child when they were too old. God does these kind of things. That's the God he's supposed to serve. And Mary knew this because if you look at the end of the verse here, she talks in verse 55, and you spoke to our fathers, to Abraham, and to his offspring forever. She remembered the promise that God would bring the seed that would deliver people. And Zechariah was like, no, you can't do that. I was like, well, God did it once before. He allowed a woman to give birth when she was past her age. If he wants to do miraculous things, he can do that. She recognized that, and she put herself under service to that. So I find that contrast really fascinating.
And again, it just speaks to the amazing position of who Mary was. And I don't think we dig in far enough on this young lady. I mean, be somebody who's in her teens of some level, who is betrothed probably to another teenager of some level. Maybe he's 18, but here they are. And it's not like we always think, oh, the women, they were kept from the synagogue and all that stuff. But when you started studying the Magnificat, which is her psalm, she writes an entire song to God. You see that she was well versed in scriptures.
Yeah, to me, I don't think we've studied this enough. I don't know if I've heard. I'm certain somebody's preached on it, but just the Magnificat is interesting because it talks about what kind of a person she is, what her theology is. A lot of times when we read scripture, we don't see a lot of the references they put to past things. And what'll pop up is something like if you've been praying your Psalms, and then all of a sudden you start praying, and then what comes out of your mouth is a psalm because you've been studying it. And it just naturally, forgive me, God, create in me a clean heart, oh God, renew a right spirit within me. You pray that because it's in you. Well, Mary's no different, and she'd really been going through her verses. So the structure of her verse in 47 and 48, 49 is very reminiscent of Psalms 103, but she's rejoicing in the Lord. She's used to how prayers are structured in their thanksgiving. She's offering, Lord, you do this, you're great. And she talks about the specificity of hers. She talks about how she understands God's character. And something when you read in the prophets, the minor prophets, and then special, God always associates with the lowly. He's one of the few deities that Yahweh is not like Pharaoh. Pharaoh only is associated with the gods. He doesn't care about the poor,
Powerful, right.
and the rich and the powerful. That's his family. His representative is Pharaoh. But in the Jewish culture, the Hebrew culture, God was so unique because he always associated with the lowly, with the foreigner, with the widow, with the orphan, with the poor. And it's something that he was not afraid to call himself to. And she recognizes this because that's what she talks about, that he's merciful to those who fear him from generation to generation, that he's shown strength with his arm, and that he scatters the proud in the thoughts of their hearts. And he has brought down the mighty of their thrones and exalted those who humble in their humble estate.
Right, and this continues on, right, to the point that he'll be born in a barn. He'll be announced to shepherds. This is all humility speaking.
Yeah.
Very opposite. You wouldn't expect the God who demands the worship of humanity to be humble.
Yeah.
Like, you would expect him to be like a megalomaniac, egomaniacal being saying, you all need to worship me. No. He's smart. He knows. It's the humble approach.
What's so weird is how we disconnect our Old Testament from our New, because this Old Testament God is always the same God who's associated with the lowly, the hurting, the hungry. And then he comes to earth, and what does he do? Associate with the lowly, the hurting, the hungry. He comes to this young lady, and he decides to let her be in the most vulnerable state possible. Where you think about people worry about when they bring their kids home for the first time, and they're like, "There's a human baby in my house now."
Yeah, it's scary.
How scary that is for moms.
Scary. Yeah, and here's the crazy thing. She would have been raised and trained in the home economics, right, of their time period. She would have been an expert of it by this point, knowing how to do things, because that's how you raised your daughter. Mom would have shown her the ropes. She would have known all these things, being prepared. She would be prepared to be a good wife to Joseph. So she was getting things down. Now, we got to remember, her getting pregnant in the middle is like, there's no greater shame. You're already a woman. And that's pretty low on the Jewish totem pole and the mindsets of certain Jewish teachers. But even worse now you're pregnant. Now you're a harlot. Now you're this horrible person. I mean, to the point where even modern day people are still trying to pin it on her as if she's some kind of horribly evil person. And you're like, wow, she is still being assaulted
to this day
for her honor. And I just find that fascinating that this is she's not just carrying something small here. I mean, the turning around, having to tell people, no, this is God in my womb. Yeah, right, crazy person, right? I mean,
you must have thought she was crazy.
Yeah, this poor girl, how many conversations did she have to have? And then Jesus himself, he's not just like, hey, look, I'm the Messiah everybody was expecting. No, he's the Messiah nobody's expecting in the way that he's doing it. And it's just crazy.
Imagine trying to raise the baby Jesus, raise him up, and then he affirms that thing. They must have thought they were all crazy.
Yeah, when he's in the bathtub walking around on water, and James is like, "Mom, he's doing it again." I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I just think it's funny though. Like they're that family. They're that family at the synagogue. Oh my gosh, here comes the Messiah.
Yeah,
You know?
or if she ever even said that, but here comes the bad kid.
Yeah.
And
the
at
troubled
least you
kid.
got some legitimate ones behind him. But that kid, we'll find out what he becomes like, because we don't know who his dad is. Right? I mean, wow, that's just got to be. No wonder not a lot is probably written about Jesus' youth. It probably wasn't. I mean, was Jesus consistently like picked on and beat up because
yeah.
they all knew who he was, but he just took it? Was his suffering as a child there? And then you got to imagine your mom. You're trying to protect this kid. You love this kid. You're trying to argue for what's gone on, and you've seen these shepherds come to your house. You've met angels. I mean,
I've seen a lot of miraculous things.
and it's very likely what we're reading here comes from Mary, right? In the book
Yeah.
of Luke, as I explained in an earlier podcast, Luke had time to sit down and actually
talk to
interview
her, yeah.
Mary, likely while Paul was in jail. And so this is very likely she's the primary source in some of these things. So
I often just people in our day and age kind of denigrate motherhood and the importance of motherhood. But I think the one thing we can learn from Mary is that her role of taking care of taking care of God, and he's one of his most vulnerable points. If he doesn't get fed, like they're on the run, there are people trying to kill babies at the time. They're trying to kill, and God is intervened, because they're moving around. They went to Egypt for a while and came back. I mean, just the amount of just responsibility.
Oh, and the stress with it.
Yeah.
I mean, you think you're freaked out because you left your kid in your
Imagine
car.
if you lost the Messiah.
Like they did.
Yeah.
It's like,
It must have been really freaky going back to the temple. We're like, we lost the baby, we lost the Messiah. Where is he? That freak out feeling. But just the idea that God does trust us when we're faithful with quite a bit. When I was in the military, it was really funny that you get a one striper who's in charge of like a $500,000 contract. And they're like, we trained you, go for it or whatever. And you're like, wow, this is a lot of responsibility. But with Mary being so young, that if you're faithful to God, there's something about the fact that he will step in and help you along that way, no matter how difficult. And I imagine, Joseph disappears in the story, yet she's still consistently all the way through. And once somebody mentioned, I don't know who it was, but out of all the people, she was the one from the beginning of his birth to watch him all the way to the death. Mm-hmm. She's the most faithful when it comes to you. It's always nice to have a faithful mom in your corner, but she would have been able to teach him his Hebrew letters. She would have been the one to teach him how the early Torah and the early writings. Is there anything else about the culture of that time as far as
moms took over much of that in the home.
the education, right?
The early education. That's why a lot of them knew. Now, they didn't have a Bible or anything, but they would make sure that they would tell the stories, and they would take them to synagogue, and the children were schooled by mom first, and then dad would take over as they got older. But yeah, absolutely. These kids are not. I mean, Jesus was going to get his education from Mary first. And we see that she knew the scriptures, right? We see at least she knew the Psalms, because, man, I would be a praying person if I was pregnant with the Messiah, right? You're just like, I'm going to pray every Psalm, every day, all the time. But, I mean, this means she was praying over him the Word of God, that she knew the Word of God, that the family knew the Word of God. That, and here's this young lady asked more than anyone else on earth to carry this burden.
Yeah.
I mean, what an insane thing. And what does she call herself? She says, from this point on, they will call me blessed. I mean, it is insane, because she didn't look at this as a horrible scenario.
No, and she probably knew. I mean, there are other prophecies, there's other things about what might happen to the Messiah and stuff. And as she's watching his ministry go through and people wanting to hate him more, I mean, I think we overlook the fact that she followed her son as he proclaims himself to be the Messiah. And you're just like, wow, that must have been really weird. But just the fact that she was faithful to him and his ministry all that time, and to be visited by an angel, I think, well, if I was visited by an angel, I'd be really obedient. But I don't know if we would, considering all of the obstacles that you're facing socially. That's not something all mothers do. It's something that some mothers who are faithful to God do. But that some people do have a hard time with all the social pressure, especially if they have a kid out of wedlock or they do anything to do the right thing because of all that social pressure and the pressure to just focus on yourself. If everybody thought Jesus was crazy, it's easy to be like, well, he's a man. Let him do whatever I want. I have other kids. I have other things to take care of. He's out of the house. I'm done with this.
Right. Yeah. And she didn't. She stuck with him. She was faithful. I mean, she's had to have gone through an amount of suffering herself. And that's where, again, we talked early on, like, do we really want to, how do we connect with our Catholic friends about Mary? And it's like, well, we don't want to denigrate the fact that, no, this woman suffered probably an extreme amount compared to any other mother on earth at some level. And I think in that way, there's a veneration that moms who have difficult scenarios, maybe you're a single mom, and you may have become a single mom because you had a child out of wedlock, and you're not carrying the Messiah. We get that, but Mary can teach you a lot about how to comport yourself in the trust of the Lord for whatever scenario you're in. That there's a very real sense that you can walk in a way of knowing, like, I think, like you said, you have a good mom, then to celebrate that at some level, right?
Yeah, I said this in my devotional. Often I think in our society, we don't, I know we have Mother's Day and fathers are very important too, but the role of a mother shouldn't be denigrated by society because it's your first Bible lesson. It's your first kind of introduction. The responsibility and role of a mother is really difficult because typically you're the one that's going to be one of the first people to teach your babies about who Jesus is. And they look to you for that. And so for every mother who takes that goal and doesn't think of it as less than, or thinks that their role in society is never their own self, I have to sacrifice. Every sacrifice, I think you see what God can do with a sacrificial mother. She releases him to the world and they kill her baby. She knows this is going to happen, and she still knows that this is ultimately what God has to do, and how difficult that must have been for moms. When you raise your kid right and the Lord and you have to release them to the world, how painful that is. But you've done the work and you give them to the Lord and then they're gone. I think that's a noble task to say, I did that well, and I'm glad that I was able to do that. But I remember when I was a kid, the first lessons that I got were from my mom. She gave me her first Bible, like a little white Bible. Mm-hmm. And in it had all these little pictures of Jesus knocking on the door of our hearts. And like it had pictures of Old Testament characters. And I'd be like, what are these? And she would sit down and tell me the Bible stories. She did this with my niece, so it's nice to watch that. But if you have that, to encourage that behavior, and for those of us who have moms, to tell them. I think we kind of neglect telling them or telling the stories about our moms, that it's a good thing to celebrate womanhood. And one of the ways we can as a church bless women is to tell of the good things that they do. I'm always blessed, that my mom did that, or she carries that on as a tradition, and, what my mom means to me because of her faith in the Lord.
So then that's where Christmas just really is a great place to land, right? I mean, you as moms get to be a representation of a minor version of Mary's story. Mary did this for our Messiah, and then for you guys, she's a great example of training up a child in the way they will go. And so here's Christmas. You get to tell the great stories. You get to lead your kiddos forward. And just thank you. If you're a mom out there and you're working hard and you feel like you're ignored, God didn't ignore you. He blessed motherhood. I mean, this is a woman next to Eve that is the most blessed. I mean, and Eve messed stuff up, right? So
yeah. Well, he sees every little moment that no one else sees. He saw the little moments where Mary was taking care of the baby Jesus when he was most vulnerable. He sees when moms do things nobly for their kids and make sacrifices, they're not in vain. They're unto the Lord, and he blesses all of those things. So any type of parent who does sacrificially, lives sacrificially, gives sacrificially, those things you don't do alone. You do them to God.
Well, thanks for joining us on our little ramble here about Mary. We hope that you got something out of it, that moms, you were encouraged, and that we can actually not feel like we have to ignore Mary. She's an incredibly blessed person. And so as you go today, I pray that this is just an encouragement for you. Thank you for joining us. And hey, share these podcasts if you've enjoyed them. And we would love to just hear from you. Maybe you have some questions or thoughts. You can send them to info@obcc.church.
Oh, yeah. If you have questions about Mary, that'd be interesting.
Yeah. And so we would love to connect with you on any of these things. Otherwise, thanks for joining us. God bless you guys. And we will talk to you soon.